Bitcoin maximalist, which I really like. He said in the 90s, people couldn't imagine that the internet would replace newspapers, TV, phone calls, shops, and many other things. Today, people can't imagine Bitcoin becoming mass adopted money. Bitcoin will do to money what internet did to information. And money is a way bigger market. So that's the beginning of our presentation. And don't be scared, I don't want to say Bitcoin or something like that. I couldn't imagine that the internet would replace newspapers, TV, phone calls, shops, and many other things. Today, people can't imagine Bitcoin becoming the first part of this presentation will be the question why. Which problems does Bitcoin solve? And we will talk about the history of money, Austrian School of Economics, the Lindy effect, and also the network effect. And the second part of my presentation will be the how question. How does Bitcoin create this, or what is the product Bitcoin about? And we will talk about cryptocurrencies or different commodities used as people of that is history, so that's not a fantasy story or something like that. That has really happened and is written down in history books. The people of Yarb have used these ray stones as money, and very special on this ray stone has been they have only been created on Palau. So to get these stones from Palau to the Yarb Island, the people had to use these old ships or these very basic ships. And this process has been very expensive and also consumed a lot of time. That leads to the situation that these specific kind of stones have been very scarce in Yarb Island. So they have been scarce, that makes them valuable, and therefore the people use them as money. And what is also very worthwhile to mention, in Palau, for example, the same stones have not been used as money. So these stones have been used as money on the Yarb Islands because they have been scarce, and it was also over a long time, so they have been sustainable and scarce. And so in the 1860 or something like that, a guy named David O'Keefe come to this island, and he wanted to do business with these people, and therefore he used more modern ships, more modern and advanced ships to bring these ray stones from Palau to Yarb Island. And it was now much more cheaper, so he brought a lot of the stones to these islands, the supply of the stones increased, and therefore he took away the savings of the people, because all the savings had been stored in these people, and because the supply was so high, the price and also therefore the value of these stones crashed down, and they have not been used as money anymore. And of course it was not a very good form of money, because they have been very impractical for transactions, because they have been very person which owns the house is now the owner of the store, and I get the house. And it's one coin which has been called Oreos. It was a gold coin, and you had, for example, 10 grams of Oreos, and on the coin there was the number 10. That's like, now to imagine how the Oreos has been, and this time has also been characterized through high economic growth, high trade volume across Europe. And the problem was the Oreos break down, or the currency stopped to exist, because the ruler of the Roman Empire, they took 5 grams of gold and 5 grams of other metals and mixed them together, but with the same nomination. So they increased the supply of Oreos, and they took it step by step. They used less gold, only 2 grams, and for example 8 grams of other metals. So there was kind of the first inflation which has ever occurred in the history, and some people say that was this kind of inflation which also damaged the economy of the Roman Republic, was also one of the reasons why the Roman Republic had broken down. And why it was invaded by the Vandals. And before the First World War, we had the first real gold standard, and this time has been called the labelle currency. So every currency around the world, or not every country, but at least America and the Europe countries, moved all together to a gold standard gold. And this time the industrialization has happened. Through this time there was an all-time high in world trade and also high economic growth. And the problem of gold was it was a good form of money, but the problem was the gold has been on one central place. You can say it was centralized. So at the beginning of the First World War, it was easy for the government to take over the gold, to take over the savings of the people, which they have accumulated through 40 years hard work and economic growth, and they printed more money than gold has been available to finance the First World War. So it's the truth that the First World War has been financed by the savings of the people. And after the First World War, of course, there was hyperinflation because all the paper money, and there was too much money has been printed. And then we had the First World War and the Second World War, and after that we had like a fake gold standard, which has been called the Bretton Woods system. So they wanted to replace like a part of the gold standard. So dollar has been backed by gold, and every other currency has been backed by dollar. Has been backed by dollar. So every currency has been backed indirectly by gold. And it was also a great time. We had high economic growth. And first time in the history of humanity, we had a really broad middle class in America and also in Europe. And yeah, the USA went away from the gold standard because they printed too much money, to keep it very simple. And the conclusion is, the system where gold has been used as money, because it was sustainable and scarce, was very good times for economic growth and also for world trade and for wealth in general, for the mass of the people. You can also say maybe it's only a correlation that there have been high growth and at the same time the gold standard, but I think it's not a correlation, it's a causality. And the only problem which has been brought by gold is very heavy, so people stored it on one place, and it was easy for the government to take away the savings of the people. And that is one of the big disadvantages of gold. And now I will go more deeply into the functions of money, and Vijay Boyapati made this kind of different categories and compared Bitcoin, gold and fiat. And for scarcity, Bitcoin of course gets an A+, because there will be only 21 million Bitcoin forever. Gold is also quite scarce because since 1940 the annual growth rate of gold has never exceeded 2%, and fiat has, if you look at the USA, Europe, Switzerland and all the industrialized countries, we seen that the broad money supply growth is around 5%, which seems not so much, but it is at least doubling of the money supply in 15 years. And some people say that's good, because if the economy grows, also the money supply should be growing, and if we have a fixed money supply, that's bad for the economy. But my opinion is different, and I will explain later what's the philosophy behind it. That's more like, if you are more on monetary, I will talk later about it. So, and the next important thing is established history. So Bitcoin is very young, which is of course a disadvantage, and gold has been used since humanity exists, and even if gold is not anymore used as money, it's nevertheless a store of value, and people buy it to protect themselves before inflation. And fiat is kind of between, since I already told you, since the breakdown of the Bretton Woods system, the world operates under a full-scale fiat system which means fiat means Bitcoin is not backed by a scarce commodity. Bitcoin should be backed by a central bank, which follows a responsible monetary policy and strong institution, which prevent the case which we can see at the moment in Venezuela, where the central bank doesn't printed too much money, which devalued the currency and lead to hyperinflation, which is terrible for an economy. And portability, Bitcoin is very good because you can have 1 million Bitcoin on your ledger or on your smartphone wallet, and you can simply go with it across borders. As already mentioned, gold is very unportable, which is the main disadvantage of gold. That was the reason why it's so centralized and why it's easy for the government to take away gold from the people. And fiat is something in between. You can use your credit card, and you can also use paper bills. It's better than gold, but it's not as good as Bitcoin. And now I will go more deeply into the word sustainable and scarcity. So the Lindy effect is very interesting, and I think also the Lindy effect will hold also for Bitcoin. The Lindy effect says that a technology which has been alive for a long time will also be alive in the future. So if we look at the Bible, for example, the Bible has been around 1,000 years, approximately, or more than 1,000 years, and it is pretty sure that the Bible will also survive more than 1,000 years into the future, because there have been so many external shocks. We have been war, we have been economic crisis, wars, big plagues. But nevertheless, the Bible survived, the idea of the Bible survived, and today people still read the Bible. And the same holds for the internet. The internet has now survived 30 years, so we can be pretty sure that it will survive another 30 years. And Bitcoin has now existed for a little bit more than 10 years. And we can all be pretty sure that it will survive for another 10 years. But after Bitcoin survived 20 years, we can be sure that Bitcoin will survive another 20 years, because time is the ultimate trust if something is secure. And secure means, in terms of Bitcoin, that Bitcoin keeps his scarcity. So only time will tell, can Bitcoin survive? Because we will see in the future external shocks which lead to pressure on Bitcoin, like financial crisis, like governments which maybe try to do a double spend to destroy Bitcoin, or external shocks which we have not in mind yet. So only time will tell if Bitcoin can keep his scarcity and therefore his value. And when more time elapses, we can be more sure that it will also be anti-fragile or resistant against external shocks in the future. And that's the problem with altcoins. Oh, it's a little bit bad here, but that's the problem of altcoins. If you have an altcoin, you have always the risk of a hard fork, so that one cryptocurrency, in very simple words, split into two cryptocurrencies with two blockchains, and then you have to build this trust from zero. And therefore, because Bitcoin is the oldest currency and it has principally the most trust, it's very difficult to compete for altcoins against Bitcoin, because there's always the risk of a hard fork, and when a hard fork occurs, they have to build this trust from zero years. And scarcity is of course very important, and that is the money, or how you say, Bitcoin printing schedule. So at the moment we are, these numbers are wrong, don't look, I should change them. This 2020 is wrong, there should be 2018, or don't look at it. I mean, don't look at the year, I made a little mistake. But at the moment, 12.5 Bitcoins are printed every 10 minutes. And in 2022, so this 2020 is wrong, in 2022, I assume it will change to 6.25 Bitcoins. Yeah, I'm pretty sure, but at least in general it's important. Every 4 years approximately, or every 2010 blocks, the amount of Bitcoin which is issued every 10 minutes will halve until it will drop to zero. But why is scarcity so important for currency? It's really simple to answer. If we all would take our money and save, for example, in oil, then because we all put our saving into oil, the price of oil will rise, and therefore the producer of oil had an incentive to produce more oil, and they could do it because it's easy to produce oil. They will produce more oil, they will bring the price down and take away our savings. Bitcoin is different. If you all use Bitcoin as a store of value, the price of Bitcoin will rise. More miners want to mine Bitcoin and want to say production is completely, or the supply of Bitcoin is completely. We talked a little bit about the two different schools of economics. We have on the one side the maturity opinion, that's Keynesian economics and monetarism. It is also taught in this university, and under this assumption Bitcoin will not succeed, and because of economics, and under the assumption has the truth in it, then you will not like Bitcoin. Maybe you will prefer not like stable coins more, which can react to the demand of it. And I mean, I think some of you maybe might disagree with me that Bitcoin is the best currency, but I think it should be a common sense that there will survive only a few currencies, only a few cryptocurrencies, of course. At the moment we have several thousand cryptocurrencies, and because of the network effect, we have WhatsApp and we can message. So if one currency has built a huge network effect, that means a lot of merchants accept it, a lot of people pay maybe even taxes with it, employer pay their employees with it, and it is used as a normal currency. Then when we have achieved this level, is maybe WhatsApp and Telegram, because a lot of people. And now the summary why Bitcoin might be superior to altcoins and also to fiat, of course. History has shown people select sustainable scarce good as money, for example raystones or gold, but there are other examples like seashells or glass beads, but I mean I don't want to talk too long, of course. And the people have to trust in this scarcity, so we need sustainable scarcity, and Bitcoin is now only 10 years old, and after Bitcoin will be 15 years old, people will be trust much more that Bitcoin also will survive like 20 years or 25 years. And only time without a double spend, hard fork or any other issues contributes to this trust. And the problem is altcoins have inherent risk for hard forks, which is a disadvantage, and it's a main disadvantage in my eyes. And even if some or the most altcoins have other functionalities which are better than Bitcoin, like faster transactions or more cheaply transaction, this cannot outweigh the disadvantage from that they have not enough sustainable scarcity. And an historical example is the demonetization of silver. I already told you. And also before the world moved to the whole gold standard, the people used silver and gold, and silver has been demonetized because gold has been in principle scarcer than silver, and the benefit beforehand has been silver was also more easy to transact, but then the people used.
You would say that altcoins have more price than Bitcoin?
Bitcoin has not, so people which stay to Bitcoin, of course there are risks of hard forks, but
I think it's
no, but Bitcoin Cash is a hard fork.
Yeah, of Bitcoin.
So to say that the altcoins will have this, no, I don't get that.
So
Bitcoin has hard fork.
Yeah, Bitcoin has hard forks, of course there has been.
So that's
But-
the argument is finished.
But nevertheless, or people which stay to I mean, you have Bitcoin, and it's the most decentralized currency in principle. And
No.
about the hard forks and then about the miner, I would say. So, if you have an altcoin, you have always the risk of a hard fork. That means you have a new currency and you have to start from zero. But Bitcoin has started from zero. You know what I mean? Bitcoin is the oldest currency, and therefore it's the oldest currency, and therefore it has the strongest Lindy effect. That's my argument. And altcoins have always the risk that there will be another hard fork.
Yeah, I mean, basically hard fork of gold.
What?
You know, they mix gold with other metals.
Yeah.
So that's basically the same thing, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, that's another analogy, which is really good. Bitcoin is like gold.
Because I think it's because Bitcoin network has the more power, the more highly hash rate. Now is around 40 exahashes. The majority of the altcoin doesn't have that level of the hash rate in the network.
That's awesome.
It's easy to. It happened to Ethereum Classic 2 weeks ago. It has a 51% attack because it's easy to create a 51% attack if the altcoin doesn't have a lot of computational power in its network. It's basically Bitcoin has 40 exahashes now, and I don't know, Bitcoin Cash has like 10% of that power, computational power. It's easy to hard fork an altcoin. Another thing is because each block, a hard fork is a divergence in the state of the blockchain. For example, if each block, the time between the hard fork increase a lot because it's more it generates more blocks, and it's the possibility that occurs divergence on the state of the blockchain is higher. That is because the Bitcoin blockchain, the time between blocks is 10 minutes, no less, because
here more easily with smaller block times. I would say this. First of all, this does not mean the definition of a hard fork, because for a hard fork you have an explicit change in rules which doesn't occur in spontaneous forks.
yes, you can.
So it's not the same thing. I would say block time doesn't matter in this case.
Yes, you can hard fork to break the chain, to break the network also. It depends, but
Yeah, but short-term forks which can occur more easily with lower block times are not the same threat as a permanent hard fork, which is caused by incompatible rules. So it's not the same. I mean, hard forks are caused by political
it's a political
tensions
tensions.
rather than just like a time to for the share.
Of course, this.
So you made like a point about the market choice, choose at the end which one is the king. Like
Yes.
you feel like so you think that Bitcoin is better than altcoins because it's been there for a long time. But on the other side, you made the point with WhatsApp. But before WhatsApp, there was Windows Messenger. There was actually take over from WhatsApp, or for example, I don't know if it's the case, but they are all Microsoft services like Explorer has been taken on from Chrome. Now Chrome have like 80% of market share. So why do you think that time is the main variable in this race to be the better coin? And you don't think the altcoin, there will be no altcoin that can take over Bitcoin?
Time is the thing, because Bitcoin was made 10 years ago. Technology is far it can't hack an intellectual
XRP is owned by the
property.
banks. How would you want to be using that?
What?
XRP is owned by the banks.
It's
Only those
centralized, yeah.
It's a centralized.
So So that's the main difference. By kind of money, like Ethereum, for example, or anyway crypto, it can be used for any other reason behind that.
I mean, I think the time is the main reason, but there are also another coin will increase. To be honest, I don't know it. To be honest, I don't know anything about Litecoin. I haven't done much research.
So,
but I think it's a different coin. It's not a fork of Bitcoin. I would say it's not a fork of Bitcoin. It's completely.
But that's like XRP. Jed McHale left XRP and wrote out Stellar, so you can see that Stellar's a hub.
Faster transactions than Bitcoin, and I think that's the main advantage against Bitcoin. But as I already said, I think for currency, much more important is sustainable scarcity, and there has never been one case in history where a currency has been mass adopted or has survived over a long time, which doesn't have sustainable scarcity and which was only easy to transact. You know what I mean? And I think also like the software development team of Litecoin is a central point of failure. And yeah, that's the main reason why I think Bitcoin is superior to Litecoin.
So I get that, and listen, I'm a huge advocate of Bitcoin. I love it. I absolutely adore it. But no, I was curious because I'll maybe need to go and research some more, because I was under the impression that Litecoin it's been created to complement Bitcoin. They look at Bitcoin as a store of value, as being the digital gold.
Yeah, like
I believe Litecoin was created to be the digital silver.
Yes.
So they created it in a 4-to-1. So it's limited in supply at 84 million coins. So it's got a 4-to-1 ratio with Bitcoin. But I also think that I might be wrong, but I was convinced it was decentralized as well.
Yeah, it is also decentralized. Not only decentralized like Bitcoin, it's decentralized with a little central part, and that's the software development team. So it's also very decentralized.
Yeah.
And what is really funny, silver has also been used as money in history, but it has been demonetized. So because people just moved to gold because gold is more scarce and therefore their wealth has been better protected. But your question?
All it was Bitcoin is a transfer of value, which is what silver was getting done in Litecoin. But you're seeing that hundreds of these altcoins are not really wanting to transact as a transfer of value. They've just raised it to get money together to run through the technology. So if you take something like capacity, they're actually taking 3D modeling, put it onto the blockchain so that developers can own the IP forevermore. So they're not wanting to transact value, it's just another blockchain technology, but they're not a currency. And a lot of these altcoins are just like that.
Of course, I mean,
But some people can get confused with the way we're talking.
Sorry, when I talk about altcoins, mean altcoins which want to represent currencies, like Dash, for example, or Ripple.
One thing you said as well about Bitcoin becoming the global standard, the global currency. But I mean, that's never going to happen, is it? I mean, it's
why do you don't think so? I think it needs a long time.
Bitcoin is a toxic brand.
What do you mean with the top?
Silk Road, drug smuggling, terrorism, financing terrorism, it's a toxic brand.
But then before that was fiat. They would just use fiat for that.
Fiat's the biggest toxic brand in the world.
Of course.
The dollar is the biggest toxic brand.
I mean, of course, if Bitcoin becomes more successful, then there will also be, and even if it comes, I mean, we are far away from that, but even if it comes in 5 years or 10 years, like a competition to pound, euro and dollar, there will be regulation, and they will maybe forbid cryptocurrency exchanges, will forbid to use it as money. I mean, it's relatively simple to do it, but nevertheless, I think there will
the only way you'll get to a global standard is if the central banks, etc., etc. But they'll never accept Bitcoin.
Let's hope they collapse.
Yeah, but I think there will be competition worldwide. Like
I believe that Bitcoin will always be a store of value. To me, Bitcoin is a store of value, and it always will be. It's mother coin. It's, you know, I hold Bitcoin as well, but XRP and Ripple are working with the regulators and everything to be the global standard. That is their roadmap. And I just cannot everybody in this world, if you mentioned Bitcoin, if you mentioned internet in 1989, they're going, oh, I'm not touching that, that's like pornography. No, but you say Bitcoin, that's for drug dealers and you know, Silk Road.
That's Silk Road and all these places, they would never use Bitcoin now. You can trace
I know that, I know.
You trace they use Monero. Yeah. No one uses an exact Bitcoin. Monero is used for everything.
But I'm just saying it's a toxic brand. It's a toxic brand.
Yeah, but the internet was a toxic brand. But
Yeah.
So why should Bitcoin not cease to be by the same development?
It could be in the long term, but because Ripple XRP have went for with the regulators and trying to get everything regulated, they're 5 years in front. The CEO of Swift said on Tuesday.
I understand your point. I also assume there will be, if we come to the point that Bitcoin will competition to our current financial system, there will be a point where regulators try to regulate Bitcoin or try to forbid it. But I think it's really difficult because they have to coordinate themselves worldwide, because there will be some small countries like Estland, Liechtenstein, and other small, maybe Albania or something like that. They will not regulate it because they will have, if Bitcoin, if we assume it is good, they will have a benefit. So countries which doesn't forbid Bitcoin will have an advantage, and that's an incentive also for bigger countries not to forbid it. Do you know what I mean? I think there will be kind of a competition.
There's room in the cryptosphere, whatever you want to call it, for every coin, and there will be a place for every coin. But because of the road that Bitcoin went initially, then, as I say, Ripple harnessing with the regulators and what have you, where Bitcoin was anti-regulation.
Bitcoin was a gift.
You know, of course to a lot of people, but Ripple and XRP have been in working with the regulators for the past 5 years, where Bitcoin hasn't. So.
Bitcoin will never go to regulators. Why are you even talking about that? It's rubbish. Why would you want that? Why would any Bitcoiners want to go to regulators and say, yeah, tax?
No, that's what I'm saying.
No.
But the point I'm getting
regulators
is,
are
will
ruled
never
by
be the
bankers,
global
not by
currency.
crooks. Why would you even want to entertain anything with that?
Correct, that's the point I'm making, but your man said that it would be the global standard, and it will never be the global standard when they're trying to keep it the way you're talking about.
And your question?
What I'm not sure about is the issues with taxation. So if there's mass adoption and, you know, I'm an artist and I take payment in cryptocurrencies and I've made a decent amount of money over the last couple of years through cryptos being paid to me from overseas. Now I've got a Coinbase account. If I take that and put it in my bank account, my Santander, I pay taxes on it. You know, nobody likes paying taxes, but I understand that there has to be taxes to be paid to keep everything running. Now, what's going to...
The society just breaks down.
Exactly, yeah. And that's
It's not anonymous, so it's easy for regulators, if they understand the blockchain, to link one thing in the real world with a transaction on the blockchain. It's not impossible. So Bitcoin is less anonymous than cash. So I think tax avoidance will, in the beginning, not a real big problem, but nevertheless we have meanwhile systems where you can do coin swaps. So if I transact him Bitcoin, I will transact it to a lot of other people, and it will be all swapped, and then it would be fully anonymous. And of course that would be problems for people which want to do transactions. That will be problems for the government which want to trace the transactions. But we will see how, I don't know how it will directly implicate the tax system of our government. But I think it brings more power to the people compared to the government. And it will be more difficult to collect taxes because you can do this fully anonymous transactions. But
it's going to be better than paper money. Paper money.
True.
Paper money is completely anonymous.
Yeah.
You collect taxes there.
Yeah. I understand that.
I mean, yeah, you're right. But nevertheless, if you do the strategy with coin swapping, it could be a fully anonymous transactions of high amounts, which will be much more easier compared to cash. Try around
It's
cash.
just so governments understand that, you know, a huge amount of purchasing is made cash and untaxed, and you know, I've been paid a lot in cash over the years as well too, and then I buy things in cash, or I get my, you know, so you know, there's a huge amount of tax avoidance by cash, and I guess governments will have to accept the fact that, you know, if there's more of a mass adoption in Bitcoin or other altcoins, that there's going to be a massive amount of tax avoidance there as well. So they're just going to have to implement different strategies to try to make sure that there's as little as possible.
Yes, I also think the same. They will try, nevertheless, to tax the people. I think everybody knows the sentence. We will, like, their own. Oh.
So imagine Bitcoin as a successful currency in the future. Let's imagine it in 100 years.
Yes, yes.
The value of Bitcoin would be so high that no one will have an incentive to spend. Yeah. Would not be a deflationary.
Yeah, it would be a deflationary
where everyone will kind of huddle for the rest of their lives, and the whole economy will collapse. I mean, the economy is based on the flow of cash, the velocity of money. If we don't spend money, how are we going to support the economy?
I think that is wrong.
You're going to stay poor, not spend any, and enjoy some of your stuff.
It's more like a theoretical question.
That's a really good question. That's actually a really good question. And I think even if the most people say a deflationary policy currency doesn't work, I think it will work. Because we had also in history from 1870 through until 1940, we had like a slightly deflationary currency. That means you have more, simply words, more purchasing power, and it worked. And the problem of deflation is only problem if the world is highly indebted, like at the moment. So because if there's inflation, the debt gets also more heavy or more difficult to repay, and the whole system will collapse. But nevertheless, I think a deflationary currency would work, because you have nevertheless at least you will have always an incentive to spend your money, because the time preference of people is positive. Do you know what I mean? So if you want to buy, if you could decide if you want to have like a car today or compared to in 1 week, you would always take the car today. Yeah, and if we have, let me talk, if we have a deflationary currency, you would nevertheless spend, but you would spend less and you would save more.
Exactly.
And that's not bad for the economy.
Next week it's gonna worth more.
What?
The same car next week.
Yeah, it will be more. So, but there will be some time where you buy the car.
Yeah.
There will be some time you only delay your consumption. And such a system will work. I'm pretty sure of it, but a lot of people think it will not work. But I think a deflationary currency is not bad, because people still would consume, but they would not buy so many crap. I would say the saving rate at the moment, I mean, after the Second World War, we had in Germany, okay, I'm not sure, but we had in Germany quite high saving rates, like around 20%, 30%, because we had a currency which has been partially backed by gold. And now we are moved down, and we can see this on the whole world. We moved down to a saving rate of 10% in Germany, or 14%. In UK, we have a saving rate of 0%. So the people save nothing. There are some people which save their money, which they earn, and some people which are indebted, so the saving rate is 0%. Also in the USA, the saving rate is 0%. And I think with Bitcoin, the saving rates, I mean, that's kind of far away in the future, but the saving rates would increase to 20%, 30%. And also with a saving rate of 30%, the whole economy will work.
In that situation, in a deflationary system, how would you see Bitcoin in relation to fiat? Would fiat exist in 100 years, or something similar to fiat? Or fiat would be the main currency and everyone was kind of focused on that as a
I think for the next 50 years, there will be a slow process of people go away from fiat and invest in Bitcoin, and therefore the market capitalization of Bitcoin will increase very steady. Not steady, of course it will be relatively volatile, but step by step Bitcoin will take away market share from fiat money. And after we have reached a certain point where there is less volatility in Bitcoin and also less probability that the price will rise. So we have, that's like 10 years from now, we have a very high price of Bitcoin, low volatility. Until then, people will use it as to transact money, to real buy their coffee with Bitcoin, their car with Bitcoin. But during the stage where we are, during the process, people will just use fiat money to transact, to make their transaction, and they will only save a part of their money into Bitcoin. That's my prediction. And I also assume it will be driven by institutional investor, which will be making long-term investments into Bitcoin.
What as a store of value?
As a store of value.
Not mostly as a medium of exchange.
No, I think there's a clear clear order. First we have the store of value, then we have the medium of exchange. So after Bitcoin is established as store of value, there will be the move to as a medium of exchange.
What would be a guess in terms of fiat value that Bitcoin would be in that situation?
Oh, it's really, there has some kind of, I mean, like, I think
numbers, figures.
you have to take the whole market of gold, for example, because Bitcoin may also replace gold, because they are doing practically the same product, like digital, like scarcity. That's the main product of gold and Bitcoin. So it will take away market share from Bitcoin, from gold. It will take away market share from the real estate. You know what I mean? Because people invest in real estate in Paris or something like that, where the house prices are meanwhile 50 times higher than the rents. So it's more a store of value than an investment. Bitcoin will take away market share of real estate and also of course from fiat. And if you accumulate that all, then you get a price like 2 million for 1 Bitcoin or 1 million of Bitcoin. But that's not an advice for investment. That's only theoretically. I think it could be. It's not certain. It's of course not certain. So don't buy Bitcoin.
But you still Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, Litecoin, you know, those the altcoins.
Within 5 years over.
Fiat is paper money.
Yeah.
Paper money is finished.
So now we come to how the system works roughly. So it's really important to understand Bitcoin is more than blockchain. Satoshi Nakamoto combined different very interesting technologies like blockchain, proof of work, timestamping, and yeah, that was it, maybe more. I mean, to explain it really simple, then no problem. So Bitcoin consists of different participants. They are the miner. They secure the system in principle. They prevent a double spend, which makes which tries to do that Bitcoin will remain safe, and the nodes which verify the blockchain. And the nodes are spread all around the world. That's the decentralized part. And also the miner in an ideal world, he also mentioned it, at the moment the miner of Bitcoins are kind of centralized. The most of the miner are in China, and that is a problem. And yeah, I hope it will be, there will be a solution in the future. But the problem is not so big, I think also. And there are of course cryptocurrency exchanges where you can exchange fiat money against Bitcoin. There are smartphone wallets which you can use to make easy convenient transactions. And there are software developers which introduce soft forks or hard forks. And so, to make a rough analogy, the private key is like the PIN, and from your private key, that gives you the right to spend your Bitcoin. You can derive the public key, which is roughly like the IBAN, but only roughly. It's a rough analogy to understand how the system works. And from your public key, you can derive your Bitcoin address, which is like a throwaway IBAN. So for one transaction, you should, it's good to use every time a different Bitcoin address. And the important thing is Bitcoin use elliptic curve cryptography, which means it's possible to come from your private key to your public key, but it's of course not possible to come from your public key to your private key, because your public key is known by everybody, or more precisely, your Bitcoin address is known by everybody. And so
sorry, could I ask a question just now?
Of course.
Is the Bitcoin address maybe analogous in your set of analogies there to an ephemeral symmetric key that is generated as a result of a public-private key arrangement transaction?
What do you mean ephemeral?
Well, because the when public and private keys are used in cryptographic sort of transfer of encrypted data, they're not used to encrypt the data, they're used to generate a symmetric key that then encrypts the data, and that is used for that one transfer. So I wondered if there was an analogy there.
No, I don't understand.
Okay.
Sorry.
So ephemeral keys are used for encryption. In the symmetric key we use agree to automate using public key and use symmetric ciphers. But in Bitcoin we don't use any encryption. It's digital signatures. So.
Oh, thank you.
And actually we use multiple private keys, which correspond to multiple addresses.
Thank you.
But there are ways to deterministically generate multiple private keys from one, like master private key.
Yeah, that was hopefully the answer. I could not answer it. So, but the difference between a bank account is and a Bitcoin wallet, or Bitcoin wallet is the process how you get to this 0.005 Bitcoin. So the Bitcoin wallet does following. It scans the whole blockchain and looks how many Bitcoins are linked, or more precisely, how many unspent transaction outputs are linked to a specific Bitcoin address. And then the software, the Bitcoin wallet makes the following. It adds up, it sums up all the transaction outputs, unspent transaction outputs, or more precisely Bitcoins. They add all these Bitcoins together, and you can see them. They are conveniently like, as you see here, 0.0.5. So your software wallet scans the whole blockchain and looks at all your Bitcoin addresses which you own, and sums up all the Bitcoins which are linked to your Bitcoin addresses. And I mean, that's really difficult to imagine, but I want to try to explain the through transaction. So I want to transact a certain amount of Bitcoin to my friend Miles. So I use my private key, which is normally a number or a certain amount of digits, but they made it more convenient, and I have a mnemonic passphrase, which is a certain amount of words. So that's of course not my real mnemonic passphrase, because then you could take away my Bitcoins that are only some words. And then I use these words to make the transaction. And here I have my Bitcoin address, and I send this 0.083 Bitcoin to Miles. And it's really important, there will be always two outputs. So there's one transaction input and two transaction outputs, and one transaction output is the change. So there will always automatically create a change, which is a new Bitcoin address, which are also owned by me. And then the rest goes to Bitcoin, to Miles' Bitcoin address. And the difference between these two, normally they should add up, but this amount is a little bit little bit less, because also a smart part is taken away by transaction fees. So in principle, what I made is when I sent Bitcoin to Miles, I told everybody in the whole system, and that are not anymore my Bitcoins. These Bitcoins are now owned by Miles. That means these Bitcoins are linked to Miles' Bitcoin address. And this information is stored on the blockchain, and the blockchain can be accessed through every node all around the world. And everybody can see that's the truth, and now that's not anymore my Bitcoin, that's now Miles' Bitcoin. And that's how the system works. And this transaction is also included into a block, and this transaction has really occurred, so it's not fantasy. I made this transaction to my friend Miles, and Bitcoin miner ensured that this information, this piece of information is truth, that it's the absolute truth, and they have an incentive to do so because they get the Bitcoins which are newly created, and they get transaction fees. And in principle, the blockchain of Bitcoin shows how much Bitcoin are owned by whom, or more precisely, how much Bitcoin are linked to which specific Bitcoin address. So that was my try to explain you how the system roughly works in a technological sense. And then, of course, we talked a lot about arguments against Bitcoin. For example, Bitcoin is we have not talked about it, that Bitcoin is a waste of energy and bad for the environment. For example, I think waste is very subjective. So to use energy to create an unflateable currency, I think it's great. And what is another point is, I mean, that was not really a counter-argument, that was only my opinion. And another really interesting thing, which I think is Bitcoin allows to monetize electricity. That means you can make out of electricity money or Bitcoin without transportation, and that's really interesting. Because, for example, we in Germany, we have like a lot of wind engine, and when we have too much electricity in our grid, they have to abandon this wind engine because it would overcapacity of it would lead to an overcapacity of the electricity grid. And my idea or my fantasy is that you just make a Bitcoin miner onto the wind engine, and then they could still run it if there's too much electricity in the grid, and too much electricity will create new Bitcoin. So that's really interesting because you don't have to transport the electricity. You can monetize it wherever the electricity occurs. But of course, at the moment, Bitcoin is kind of mixed of the carbon footprint. A lot of miners use coal in China, but there's also a lot of hydro energy used, for example, in Norway to mine Bitcoin. And then the arguments against Bitcoin, some people say Bitcoin is backed by nothing and therefore fantasy money, but all currencies derive their value from sustainable scarcity. So also the Swiss franc, for example, which has been very long back to gold, I think until 1990, is now backed by nothing. And the people like, nevertheless, to buy a Swiss franc because the Swiss central bank makes a relatively good and conservative monetary policy. So it's sustainable and scarce, and therefore the Swiss franc is valuable, whereas other currencies like Venezuela are not valuable because there's just too much money, or they've been printed too much money. And Bitcoin is too volatile. I think that's normal because Bitcoin is in a very early stage. And if Bitcoin matures and get a higher market capitalization, also the volatility will go down. But that's, I mean, I assume in the next 5 years, the volatility of Bitcoin will still remain too high to use it as a normal currency to transact, to make normal transactions. But that's, of course, a good counter-argument, but I think time will show that the volatility will go down. And of course, the classic argument is Bitcoin can only process limited amount of transactions. And in my opinion, Bitcoin competes against the central banks. That's really good. And it's not an analogy, that's the This should be the goal of Bitcoin. And Lightning Network, which is a system which is built on top of Bitcoin, which tries to keep the transaction out of the blockchain, keep it off-chain, will compete against payment services like PayPal or Google Pay. And yeah, so that's my counter-argument to the argument Bitcoin can only process limited amount of transactions. That's my summary and outlook. I made the annual growth rate in percentage of Bitcoin. So at the beginning we have been like, I only named it Venezuela phase because the inflation has been very high, because every 10 minutes 50 Bitcoins have been printed, where the inflation like 209%. And there's also to say that, I mean, after the first Bitcoin has been printed, we had 50 Bitcoin, the next Bitcoin have been another 50 Bitcoin, which is like inflation of 100%. So, but that was the goal of Satoshi, because in the beginning he also only wanted that currency, that we have like a specific mass of currency. And so inflation in the beginning, it was planned. And then we got like in a more fiat phase one, like a monetary supply growth of Bitcoin of around 12%, like emerging countries like China. Then we had fiat phase two, growth of the currency like Switzerland, like a conservative central bank. And now we are in the gold phase. And we are not yet in the gold phase. Until 2020, we come to the gold phase, where Bitcoin slightly, where the annual growth rate of Bitcoin will be like approximately like gold. And then 2025, which is 7 years from now, I think that will be the most interesting time. And then at this moment, Bitcoin will be the scarcest commodity on earth. And I think that is really good for the price of Bitcoin, of course. And I think that will also, it will lead to or I assume it will lead to an increase in the price. So now we have 2019, for the next 7 years, Bitcoin will get scarcer. We have the linear effect, time will elapse, which will show if Bitcoin can survive, if Bitcoin is anti-fragile, will it survive a financial crisis, double standard tax, and other external shocks? Will it also survive competition from different altcoins? I mean, if more time elapses, we can be more sure that it will be survive. And I hope so there will also some technological developments which it makes easier to store Bitcoin, because to store Bitcoin is really difficult, and I think it's too difficult for the majority of the people which are not interested in finding out how to store a private key and stuff like that. And I hope there will be progress, and I also assume there will be progress, and I assume there will be also progress in second layer solutions, for example the Lightning Network. And because if we have such solutions, we could send Bitcoins all around the world for under 1 penny, which is which is great. And I assume also that institutional investors will invest into Bitcoin. I think the first adoption of Bitcoin will be in the high inflation, bad bank, infrastructure countries like Kenya or other African countries. And we see also right at the moment that Binance invests or tries to invest in Africa to build their cryptocurrency exchanges. And I think that's a big market, and I think it will be early. The adoption in African countries will become very soon, because even if the most cryptocurrencies are relatively volatile compared to our fiat money, they are not as bad compared to currencies with high inflation, which we have in African countries. And the second thing is also, for example, in Kenya, the people use M-Pesa, so they transact money through their smartphone. And for this transaction, I think at the moment you pay like 15% transaction fees. So that's really high, and I think cryptocurrencies will do better in terms of transaction fees. And also, we also talked about that regulators will of course fight against Bitcoin, but I assume because there's international competition also for regulation of Bitcoin, countries with good regulation will have an advantage. and that will also lead, or that will also incentivize other countries to make good regulations. And of course there will be black swans attacks against Bitcoin. Maybe there will be some problems which we have not talked about today, and that's of course a problem. And of course make your own research, don't take my word for granted. I would advocate to you 2 books. One is from Andreas Antonopoulos. He's I think one of the most popular people in Bitcoin, Ethereum, and also in general in Bitcoin and Ethereum. And his book is really good, especially for computer science students. But I also liked it because it gives a good introduction or a good description of the technology. And for people which are interested in the economics behind Bitcoin, which we also talked about today a little bit, they should read the Bitcoin Standard from Saifedean Ammous. And yeah, I really like these books. These are my sources. And thank you for coming. It was great. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yes, great. Thanks. Just a couple of words from me, folks. My name is Max. I work for a company called Product Forge. A few of you might recognise me or recognise us. We live stream meetups, meetups like this, meetups for this technology. We do it for free so that we can get the opportunity to kind of talk to people in the community about the events that we run. We run 4-day hackathons in a variety of different sectors. We've got an event coming up later in February, the Digital Health Product Forge. Runs from a Thursday evening to a Sunday evening, and during that time we basically mentor you through a process of team formation, identifying a problem that needs solving that relates to health, designing a solution, prototyping the solution, putting together a pitch, which is a validated bid, which involves validating the business case for the product or the use case for the product, and then you pitch at the end of the event. For technical and non-technical people, so if you're interested in joining a team and building a health product prototype, come and say hello. I'll be hanging around packing up after this. And we're also running a History and Heritage Product Forge in March. And that's all about using technology to maximise the value that countries and Scotland and individuals get from historic assets. But also other things like maintaining historic assets and things like that using technology. So if you're interested in history and heritage and health, come say hello.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Of course. Of course.
What we talked about Bitcoin before was we find that because the American dollar is rising in value, places, three places, India, Turkey and Venezuela, spike in Bitcoin purchases because their currency started to fall. Especially in Turkey, they just do call. So that's like a safety because their currency, the Turkish lira, is collapsing. So in these cases, they're actually getting it happening now.
Yes.
Actually going through time. All of a sudden people say, oh, we don't want our own currency, we want the other one, which is